In The Sopranos, mob boss Tony Soprano navigates his life as both a gangster and a family man. Tony's main issues in life come from the people around him, from people like the nefarious Jamal Ginsburg, who Tony lived in constant fear of, fear that Jamal would punch his fucking lights out. Tension and paranoia is rife in Tony's life due to the characters he is surrounded by. Who knows when next his title as boss will be challenged by a usurper like Richie, backed up by the likes of Janice and Uncle Junior. How can he be at peace knowing with a quick turn of the head he can be slapped in the face at any given moment by Chrissy's camel nose? Who's to say guys like Walden and Little Paulie will remain loyal to their capo, these younger guys coming up? You know what else is coming up? Flexispot's E7 Pro standing desk, the sponsor of this video. Driven by individual drive motors in each leg, the E7 Pro can be lowered and raised with the touch of a button. It has a 160 kg load capacity, meaning even Ginny Sack could rest on it and all would be well in Jersey. I found it easy and quick to assemble. There's no need to get Pudgy Walsh on the horn for this one. It can be used sitting or standing, and it takes just a few seconds for it to reach its minimum and maximum height, the maximum which comes around about to my chest height. There's a magnetic cable tray which allows the underside to keep from getting messy, and the keypad gives you complete control over the desk, including a child lock, a 4-way memory controller for preset heights, and it even has a built-in USB charging port for your phone. Flexispot are also running discounts and sales, as you can see here. Standing desks allow you to switch between sitting and standing positions quickly and to adjust your perfect sitting height so you aren't slouching. The E7 Pro is a great option to have. Check it out in the link in the description below. One of Tony's biggest challenges in the show was Feech LaManna, the legendary mobster who's released from prison in season 5 and immediately becomes a headache for Tony, initiating a lawnmower war with Clarence, disrespecting Tony in front of the crew, and even doing deals with New York underboss Johnny Sack behind Tony's back. Feech is charismatic, well liked, he was an OG, and as such he poses a danger to Tony's position. But Tony has learned from previous issues like Richie April, so he decides to nip the issue in the bud, not killing Feech, as that would upset the troops, but setting him up to be sent back to prison. Before we even see Feech, we're told he was a moustache Pete that was made before the electric light, but Robert Logia's performance doesn't really come off as a Sicilian immigrant like, say, Furio. Of course, the reality is that the show's writers retrospectively added Feech to the show, knowing that they were going to put in a dangerous character as a foil for Tony, and they went back, noted that there's a character called Feech LaManna, and they've never mentioned that he died, so they just made this character that Feech LaManna. Now on this channel, we often discuss the big questions of the show, like what happened in the final scene, but we also like to take a look at smaller, more intimate scenes and lines in the series that a casual fan might not think much of, but obsessive Sopranos fanatics like you and I pore over, like what exactly was Silvio going to ask Finn when Finn was telling them about Vito's ass munching, and exploring what I think is Tony's weirdest line in the show. Today I wanted to do something similar for a line that Feech says, and a little analysis on the entire scene it's in. I've been thinking about it for a while, but I'm here now, I'm telling you about it now. It's a strange line, I don't fully understand it, and it seems many people have different interpretations of it. So Tony is talking to the guys at the Crazy Horse and Feech walks in, and the guys talk about the New York succession war before Adriana knocks and walks in and gives Feech a drink he must have ordered. She then says, "Anybody else?" and Feech then says, "We need anything else and one of the kids will come out." Ade's eyes dart towards Tony, who's staring at Feech, and she asks Tony if he wants something as he hasn't had any lunch. He politely refuses and Ade walks out, with Sylvia following her and saying something to her. I've always found this scene kind of weird and never fully understood it, because the way it's played, it seems like Feech has said something untoward towards Adriana, given the way the mood of the room changes and she looks at Tony. Chris even shoots a menacing look at Feech a few seconds later, but Chris does this after Feech talks about some skifusa that Feech knew years back, a woman with long legs. And Feech talking about this straight after speaking with Ade, plus the way he looked her up and down when he was saying the kids line, shows us all what he was thinking about when looking at Ade. Sick shit. Feech is also almost abashed in the way he says "my compliments" to Chrissy, like he knows he's kind of screwed up and gave away that he's eyeing Ade up and talking about a maid guy's fiancée the way he did. But there was nothing in the actual initial comment, the kids line, that suggested anything dodgy. When I first watched the show, I assumed it was some kind of pervy comment, like he's saying, if she keeps coming back, he's going to end up knocking her up and having a kid with her. Or the way she's dressed, one of her mammaries is going to pop out. I mean, he can't be talking about her uteruses because both of them were taken out. Unless it's a bad edit, it just feels a bit off. Like it's played in a way that Feech has said something rude to Adriana. She's noticed, as have the guys, which is why Sil goes after her, as if to apologise on Feech's behalf. But the comments sound pretty innocent, so it doesn't really work. And Feech only starts looking rude when he starts talking about the other woman. But he clearly did something wrong, otherwise why did Adriana react with a sharp look at Tony? And then there's Silvio going after her. Although, looking at the scene again, Sil looks like he's remembered something and then goes after Aid with an envelope in his hand, so what he and Aid discussed was probably something completely unrelated. It's just that it happens straight after Feech's comment. It makes us think the two are linked. It could be that Feech says kids, meaning he's just called the other gangsters in the room kids. It's undermining, and it's the kind of thing Tony is teaching his guys not to do. Of course, it could simply be that the implication of his statement is essentially, hey lady, men are talking here about manly stuff, so kindly do one and we'll call you if we need you. And Aid took offence to it. She may run the crazy horse, but she doesn't run her Uncle Feech. He's from the old school. Wants women out of the door before talking business, and to be honest, he does it pretty fairly, I thought, getting the message to Aid that he wants her to leave, but doing it in a polite fashion. He's even saying one of the low-ranking associates will come to you, so there's no need for you to wait on us. Plus, it would be awkward if she ended up being an FBI informant or something crazy like that. I think the issue is not so much what he said, it's that he said it. Aid is basically asking the room if anyone wants anything else, and she specifically looks at Tony, but then Feech makes his comment. It's Tony's place as the boss to speak for the room, not Feech's. And even Adriana knows this, which is why she makes the look, and then she addresses Tony directly, as if to re-establish the proper order and decorum. Feech has unintentionally asserted his superiority over Tony here, and it highlights his state of mind, not to wait for Tony to talk to Aid, instead speaking for everyone. He does the same thing a few seconds later when he wants to speak to Tony alone, saying, fellas, you want to give us a minute? Essentially ordering people out of the room, when it's Tony's place to do so. Tony nods at Chris, and Chrissy signals to little Paulie and Benny. The order is firmly established and followed on their side. It's Feech who's not respecting the chain of command and hierarchy, which is a part of his entire character and indicative of why he's such a danger to Tony. I don't even think he does it on purpose half the time. He just genuinely sees Tony as a 47-year-old kid. But that lack of respect and not knowing his place is what ultimately damns him to living out his years behind bars again. Honestly, everything you need to know about the Tony and Feech conflict is here in this scene. Though it's done cordially and playfully, there's a secret war being fought here. Tony and Sil on one side, Feech on the other, and the prize being the adoration of the young associates. Initially, the peace, the order, the hierarchy are all perfectly established. And then in comes the dinosaur, with no regard for how things are not as they were before he went away for 20 years not a peep. His entire demeanour shows the utter disregard he has for Tony, saying he's come to kiss the ring, calling him Don Antonio with a hint of sarcasm. And when he launches into his card game robbery story, he utilises it to say things he would otherwise not be able to say, like, this one is fucking scared, or he should be dead by now. Clearly not all of this is just an old man with no filter. He's subtly making power plays all throughout his time on the show, in particular in this scene. His natural gravitar and his legendary status is glowing. The kids are in awe of him, and he greets everyone in the room, hugging the maid guys, though the associates only get handshakes. Real greaseball shit. But the point is, he challenges Tony by dominating the room, and then attempts to dominate the conversation by going into one of his impermeable stories. As Silvio later says, comes into this office and starts ordering people around. These are all clues that Feech, as an updated and more charismatic version of Richie, would gather support for an eventual attempted takeover. Silvio, the skillful wingman of Tony, brings up the card game robbery, the one Feech story that would actually undermine him and make Tony look good. Feech is silenced, and Silvio then playfully says, oh, that he doesn't like to talk about. Chris, having been bruised earlier by Feech's comments towards Aid, rubs in the salt, saying, I heard this is a great story. And now Feech has to tell it. Silvio really shines here. He fights Tony's fight for him, even adding, or if his old man didn't have so many friends. When Feech says he didn't retaliate after the card game robbery, Feech is trying to make it look like he showed Tony mercy, and Sil flips it by saying you had no choice, refusing to give Feech a victory in this battle of wits. During the story, Feech is trying to overshadow Tony and frame the story in his favour, calling Tony a fucking punk, for example. And after the skirmish between Feech and Silvio, Tony, who's been pretty quiet during the entire conversation, instead studying Feech and observing the reactions of Benny and little Paulie, brings down the hammer with his "Feech has forgiven, even if he hasn't forgotten, but it's a great yarn," which in Tony's own words, nips it in the bud before Feech gets going. It's what he does in this scene, it's what he does to Feech's preemptive takeover attempt later when he sends him back to the can. He insults Chris, he disrespects Tony, he annoys Aid, all in one scene, and more importantly, he makes the young guys feel good, who could potentially become his new soldiers in a takeover. There's a lot of great things about this scene, like the Easter egg with Sylvia noticing a song being played that the actor who plays him, Steven Van Zandt, is a part of. And Tony's reactions throughout the scene are great, starting with his annoyance at Chris saying John has declared war, to all of his looks to Feech and the kids throughout. In particular, one concerned look he shoots the kids when he sees that they're impressed that Feech used to be Tommy Pinto's driver. Interestingly, what I said about Feech coming in, hugging everyone and dominating Tony is exactly what Tony does to Feech later on during the card game, where Feech is annoyed by Tony arriving and interrupting his story and becoming the centre of the room. It seems like Tony made a deliberate attempt to go around and greet everyone individually as a counter to what Feech did, even though usually Tony doesn't do this. He even gave Vito a hug, risking making his hands fucking disappear. Perhaps Feech's line about Tony B giving his parole officer a massage and tickling him was an attempt to win the room back, something Tony notices, so he keeps on greeting people until Feech gets fed up and says, "How many times is this guy gotta say hello?" Tony humiliates Feech here again when he ruins the story. He's basically robbed his card game all over again 20 years later, and just like before, there's nothing Feech can do about it. Keputs. You know, thinking about Feech tickling that animal Blundetto and Tony's reaction makes me think of a three-way tug-of-war between the men that was perhaps planned, but we never got. Feech is really interesting precisely because we don't quite know what the original plan for him was. As many Sopranos fans know, and I touched on this in my other video on Feech, it's widely thought that Robert Logia's time on the show was cut short because he struggled with his lines and caused scenes to have to be refilmed constantly. He later died of Alzheimer's. And that's not a Sopranos quip, Logia really did die of Alzheimer's several years after the show ended, and it's possible the early signs of the disease were there on set of The Sopranos. This narrative is disputed by the likes of Alan Sepinwall, author of The Sopranos Sessions, who claims David Chase always planned to write off Feech early on, with the character being a device to show that Tony had learned and grown after dealing with characters like Richie and Ralph. But good thing then that his book don't mean guts to me, as I don't see that as an issue. Of course Chase would introduce a character like Feech to eventually write him off, that's not what's being discussed. It's whether originally Feech's demise would have come much later. I remember Steve Sturipa saying on the Talking Sopranos podcast that the scene with him, Feech, Tony and Junior took ages to shoot because Logia kept forgetting his lines. Certainly when rewatching the show, Feech does seem to come and go really quickly for a character built up for so long, like his entire arc was on a speed run. And did they really devote all of this screen time to a character just to highlight that Tony has grown? I've always wondered what the original plan for Feech was, given Logia's health interrupted one of the writer's impermeable stories. Could it be that originally it was Feech and Angelo Gareppe who were close in the can, but when Angelo is whacked, Feech goes off the reservation? And then Tony would have to give him up to New York, but risk alienating his cousin Tony B, who was also of course close with Feech. I mean, Feech and Angelo, two old-timers, being best buddies in the can makes a lot more sense than Angelo being friends with some random associate like Tony B. When Tony is having lunch with New York, there's an awkward 80-yard line where Angelo says that Animal Blundetto was his best friend in the can, when just a few seconds earlier he asked Tony who his cousin is. So he's friends with Tony Uncle John's cousin for 20 years, but forgets that he's Tony Soprano's cousin? It doesn't make sense. Maybe Angelo also had Alzheimer's. Perhaps instead it was Feech that was going to get hit by New York. I don't know why. Lovers' quarrel maybe. A beef between him and Phil Leotardo over who's allowed to keep going on about doing 20 years in the can. But Tony gives up Feech to New York, and when Feech dies, Tony B goes irate. They were definitely setting Tony B and Feech up to be close. Feech giving Tony B cash to get started, the two driving around together, Feech even trusting Tony B enough to say to Blundetto, "Can I be frank with you about the Boy King?" Perhaps they were setting up a power conflict between Tony S and Feech, with Blundetto, loyal to both, stuck in the middle. And we do see in the first few episodes of season 5 that Feech encourages Tony B to get back in the game, while Tony supported Blundetto's life as a civilian. It clearly seems that there's a storyline there that was being set up that is suddenly cut short. It's sad when they go young like that. Feech was a powerful card in the deck, and we never really got to see him played, whether it be as a usurper or his relationship with New York. The only thing I can't really see is why New York would pop Feech. Maybe Johnny Sack does it as a favour to a desperate Tony, in exchange for Tony taking out Carmine Jr. loyalists. But of course the story may have been completely different in the original script, and the idea of Phil Leotardo, who also just came out of the can, and Feech LaManna having either a friendship or a conflict sounds mouthwatering. Feech did seem to be getting close to Johnny Sack, and given Tony backed out of whacking Carmine Sr. in season 4, maybe Johnny Sack warms up to the idea of Feech as the new boss of Jersey. Whatever it was, Steve Buscemi had a contract for 2 seasons but only lasted season 5 because the writers realised they had written themselves into a corner with the character, and realistically he'd have to be killed at the end of this storyline. I think it's likely that it was due to the writers having to accommodate Logia leaving the show early that Buscemi got the short straw and they couldn't make the storyline work without bumping him off. Otherwise, how exactly did the writers write themselves into a corner with Tony B's storyline? Because it seems relatively simple. He comes out of the can, he does something he shouldn't, Tony has to put him down. So it does strengthen the idea that maybe it wasn't like that originally, and Feech's, Angelo's, and that Animal Blundetto storylines were basically cobbled together after Logia left the show. So what do you make of Feech's weird line to Adriana, and what do you think the original plan for him was? Let me know in the comment section below, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.